welcome. We're going to be doing a creative slab today. We're going to make an owl. So, I've got a little tiny slab. I've got a can. We're going to put the can on. I'm going to use my needle to mark on the can on both sides. And then also in the clay as to where they mark. I'm going to roll just a gentle line so you can see where it goes. And keep following it until you find your mark. So that's our basic outline. You can kind of see the lines there, I believe. Yeah, there we go. So our base is going to be flat. And if you want anything like a head, you can actually add it at this stage. Just going to turn this around so I can see it better. Okay. So this is our nice bottom here. I'm going to, I don't have my ruler here again. So we're going to trace the line. This is going to be our bottom. Where your marks are, give yourself about an extra centimeter of room just for the overlap in the can width. Okay. Get that spare clay. A little more than that. It'll be colors of plastic when you need them. You're going to find where your head is and you're going to make it however you want. I'm going to start with, I'm not very good at freehand drawing. So I'm going to close enough for me. So I'm going to trace my line out. And this was just a very light carbon, just so I can see where my lines were. Now I have to go back and actually cut all the way through. If you've got any lines, make them very noticeable, because they're going to be less noticeable as you cut them out. As you notice, the clay kind of moves around. Okay, peel this apart. So there's our basic owl head. Put it back so it's on the inside again. We are going to need a base. Here's our can. This is maybe a little bit tight. This piece of masking tape just so happens to be a little bit bigger than the can. Right about the width of what the clay is. So I'm just going to trace around this. Keep your needle straight up and down or else angled out. Just give yourself a little extra room. Okay. There's our base. There's our piece. Lots of these little pieces here you can just clean up a little bit later. Right now it's just too wet. You also need your owl standing up. Okay, so we're going to pick whatever side we want up. If you've got stamps, put your stamps on. If not, put your initials on the bottom. Okay, turn it over. Place the side. And that piece of plastic again. The can you're going to want, you're actually going to wrap it in plastic so that the clay doesn't stick to it. Wrap it up, put the plastic inside. Okay. So you can either wrap it so he's inside here or so that he's outside here. In this case, I took the extra room so he could go on top. If you want them on the outside, make them a bit bigger and give yourself extra room here as well. So what I'm going to do first is put him to the side. We need to get this guy onto the can. Okay, so even though we gave him a full centimeter room, as you can see, he's still pretty tight, mostly because of the weights pulling down. There we go. Just make sure you tuck the plastic in. The plastic's going to want to get into the cracks. It's always going to be a nuisance that way. So there we go. So I am going to score both sides. Just the lines that the slip has something to grab onto. You get your slip. Now for the fun part of actually getting these seams together, you take it. And also, just like stitches, this is partially going to bind your clay together. Watch his head, because he is going to want to try and flop forward here on you. And just massage that seam in. That actually turned out pretty good. So because you can't easily turn him upside down, getting your base on is going to be a little bit more fun. Okay, we're going to put our base down. We're going to score the lines. We're going to add lots of slip. Yes, my fingers are up here holding the ears for support as well. Okay, I'm also going to put a little bit of slip on the base here too, just because this guy's not going to want to cooperate very well. Okay, we're going to line him up, plop him down. As you can see, they're not quite the exact same size, but I don't want the seam here, so I'm just going to go ahead it. Smooth it down. Just go ahead and use the back of your nail or a tool. As you can see this. Use the back of your nail. You're just going to basically move the clay from one side to the other. Just to one, form a really good seal, and two, just to even things out. If you wanted, you could do like little borders or something or add extra grooves, but they don't quite work with an owl. If you ever just want to make one tube for like pencil holders, this method also works as well if you don't want to get the extruder dirty. As you can see, sometimes you get divots. Might need still a little bit of clay. Fill in the divot. Move the slip. Just smooth it out. Away you go. I'll worry about the rest of it later. Okay. Just making sure I get the bottom flat. Okay, now for our decoration, we have our basic owl. Some of it you can clean up now. For eyes, they are often easier to do small little circles. Make them thinner than this. So you take a tool to cheat here quickly. This tool here is right about the right size for an eye, actually. I like using tracers. You don't have to. I do. So play around with it. See which ones you like the best. Which direction, what angle. What kind of eye shapes. This could be an evil owl. I think that might not be quite you, the look we're after. There's a little much slip on that one, kind of oozed out. To do some extra cleaning there when I come to that. And you can do it like that. If you want, you can carve a little circle inside for like pupils or something, or you can put another little circle inside of it. Big for that one. Another shocked owl. I think in this case, I'm just going to grab a smaller spoon. And if you want, practice on there a smaller piece first, just to see what the effect's going to be. Beak. Let's take a look. Not so sure about a beak. That's way too big. Okay. Let's go to scale. Closer. Still too big. That looks more appropriate. So I'm going to squish it there so I got the flat base to work with. of nostrils to it. So I think birds are all supposed to have nostrils. Not bad. Okay. I'm just going to score it a bit. I'm going to score this piece here as well. If you want, you can do a little tiny pick out there so it's got a place to sit or stick into. So that also gives it a little bit of an edge. There are a couple of wrinkles on the one beak part here, so I'm just going to kind of smooth them out with the tool. Okay. And if you want, you can add things like wings and feet and tails. I'm going to add some wings to this one. Normally use a rolling pin for a piece this big, but I'm just using my tools to do it quickly here. You don't want so thick that it stands out forever, but neither do you want so thin that it's nearly invisible. That's about thin enough. So I have no tracer for a wing, so we're going to have to guess. Actually, I'm just going to this piece, use them as a rough draft. As you can see, that's really too big. That's closer to the size we're after. Okay, so now we know we want roughly this size, so let's try and do an aim for that. Not quite, but close. Now that we have one, I can trace a second. Okay. I'm just bending the edges in here so they're going to be a smoother outer edge. Okay, if you want to add any decorations, it's easier to do so now than when they're on the bird. Turn him these little bits away. Figure out exactly where you want the wing. Wherever it's touching, it's going to be very sturdy. Wherever it's not, it's going to be very fragile. So determine exactly how much you're willing to go between the two pros and cons there. I made most of mine stick to it just because if it's likely going to be a kid that probably gets this, is my guess. Kids don't always do that well with fragile things. Okay. And I lined this wing up right beneath the ear. So I'm going to do the exact same thing here. And angle them in. Just going to tack them on lightly, turn them around. And now I can see exactly where the wingtip is, so I can twist him down so they match. And then mostly press them in to make them sturdier. Okay. And if you wanted, you could do things like making feathers. Various tools have various effects, so things like rubbers make a feather effect. There are a number of other tools around that give different effects. You can imagine this will make actually a very pretty feather pattern. So all sorts of patterns running around. Quite a common one is your very common curved guy. There we go, those are your patterns. But I'm going to leave him like that for now. See, this one's up a little bit higher. Shift him down. If you want to do any cleanup, you can. Just a little bit of slip here that kind of oozed out. Otherwise, most of it has to wait for us to come back and clean it in a week. But one big thing to note is when I built around the can is that our clay shrinks 20%. It also shrinks rather fast. So later tonight, I am going to have to come back and pull out this can. If you want to cheat, you can try and use a hairdryer that's set for a couple of hours to harden it. And this one's actually stable. He actually might be stable enough. Let's see if we can do it. You're going to unfold the plastic that you tucked in. Stick your hand in. Gently wiggle it out. Our clay was already shrinking some, so I can feel it suction to the edge of the cup. There we go. Here's our can. Take our plastic. Voila, there you go. This one was small. As you can see, it is very bendy, very, very delicate right now. So once you take the can out, I suggest not moving it at all if you can help it. Maybe put it on a board, even stuff some newspaper inside to help it. But there we go. We can now come back in a week to clean it. Okay, welcome back. So here's our owl. He did dry a bit more than I anticipated, so he's going to be a little more fun to clean. So we're going to go ahead, watch for any sharp points. He's so dry now, it's not going to be easy to carve in patterns. So it's a good thing we finished most of them last week. So let's start with a sponge. If you got a dry sponge, you can usually get rid of most of these little bits and pieces that stuck on. Any little rough bits you do have to get with a tool. Most any tool will work, whatever seems to fit your job. If you do need to do any carving, you still can. Just be careful because it will be brittle. The hardest part's going to be getting around these wingtips. Be careful you don't break them or the ears because they stick out. They're easy to lean against, rub your finger against, and they could snap. They're very brittle until we get them fired. Any little bits you want to trim, just go ahead and trim them. And as I just warned you about the wingtips, I went to push against it and I snapped my wing. I'll see what I can do to fix it when I get a little bit further in. So let's put him to the side for now. So yes, that's the hazards of having a wing when you're trying to support your piece. You don't realize how close the tip is to your hand until it's gone. You can also smooth down the back as well. Take a sponge to it and smooth it, or you can just leave it if you like the texture as is. I actually don't mind the texture on the front, so I'll leave it there. Okay. So we're going to do our second wing now. Let's do any carvings that we need to, deepen any of the ones that we think need to be deepened. Okay, so there we go. That's another wing done. Okay, the next spot I'm going to do is this upper edge. You can see it, there are some rough patches there that need to be thinned out. Using a ruler or a flat tool makes it quite easy to level it. Also, get down to this level and eyeball it so you can kind of see what your leveling is like. There we go. Just going to do an inner trim of this inside here, just so there's no sharp edges. Same with the outside. The sponge will take care of a good chunk of it, but there's quite a bit on this piece. Just turn it upside down, get all the pieces out. Okay, sponge it. I am going to get this spot here a little bit damper in preparation for slipping it. Same thing with this piece, get a bit damper. It will take time for the moisture to sink in, but it will. There you go. So while we're doing that, while watching this other guy's wingtips, we don't snap it as well. We're going to turn to these big ears that dried way more than I anticipated they would. And as you can see, they are in dire need of cleaning. So just go in, try and get all the cracks out that were too wet to get in last time. If you want to get any detailing in, make your grooves bigger, now's the time. Careful you don't snap the ears off as well. They're going to be just as delicate as those wing tips are until they're fired. So you can see the back has quite a bit of buildup I also have to get off. Sometimes it's easier to get your tools a bit damper because then it turns more into mud as opposed to the dry, chalky consistency. And it scrapes off a bit easier. Sometimes. Play around with it, test it out, and see what the difference is on your piece. It can depend how dry it is. If you can spur on the back, just don't stab yourself. Get the tool wet. Sometimes moistening it with the sponge and then carving can also help, especially when it's this dry. Yeah, that's making it easier. I'm just doing each of these little ears to get in there. You don't want any sharp pieces because those will cause problems later. Sometimes they just don't want to come off. Any dry pieces that fall inside, just turn them upside down, they will come out. Just gonna flip some more of these crumbs back. This piece is dry again. Let's redampen it. As is this piece. Just so that the moisture gets a little bit deeper into the clay for when we go to touch it up. Be careful if you're trying to dig too much at once. When it's this dry, it will give you these big lines and will kind of chip out like chalk. So it is quite brittle. Use your tools to get into places that you can't. If you see anything that looks kind of out along the way, you can always stop and fix it as well. That's never a problem. Every once in a while you get a little bit of overflow. Just go ahead, scrape them off. I'm just trimming the back of this ear again, once again to get the sharp edges off. One corner there, I actually had to chip a piece of it off just to get it down a bit. It was just a bit too sharp. Okay, and I'm just going to go between each one of these little feathers. Okay, so now his ears are cleaned. Both of his wings are cleaned. I've got a little bit more right there I need to trim out. As you tilt things at different angles, you will see different things. Okay. Where'd that wingtip go? There it is. So his eyes got a little bit of a scuff on it. I'm going to see if I can't get that out very gently without losing the... So I'm just dampening it with the sponge. So I rub my finger over it just to get the scuff out, because it's right up top there. Maybe I'll try the back of my nail. That usually works a lot. Okay. Be very gentle with the beak, so it's not on by much slip. Where did my little thing go to clean up the nose? And as I slipped, as you can see, the nose refilled with a little bit of loose clay. Just go back in and dig it out. Yes, we're picking his nose. Okay. Now we're done with that thrilling hobby. Okay. If you want to make the holes bigger, you can. I've already forgotten what exact tool we use to make those holes. Here it is. You could try. It's going to be a little bit harder when it's this dry, so I'm actually not going to do it in this stage. Then you can go ahead and clean the bottom off. There's usually not much to do with the bottom. Just make sure it's flat, that there's no sharp edges around the edge. Okay, give it in there, check over. Okay, so we've mostly managed to clean it without breaking both wingtips, so we just need to replace this one. I'm going to lay him kind of on his side. No, I can't. His ears are sticking out too far, so we can't lay him on his side for this. We're going to rehydrate the body and the wingtip. And we are going to take our scorer. We're going to put some lines in here so that things can stick. Same with the wingtip. Lines in it so that they can bind. So right now it's so smooth that not much is going to stick. Okay, we're going to get some slip. Try and choose a bit of a thicker consistency this time, usually off the side. We're going to put a big blob of slip there. We're going to get a little bit more. Okay, we're going to line them up. This stage you can still slip things. There's There's not quite enough in the spot that I want. But it is taking the slip very nicely. So put lots of slip there. I'm going to put him back on, line him up as best we can. And we will have to make a note for anybody who's doing the kiln that they watch this wingtip, because it is going to be very brittle for some time. Very carefully clean up behind it. Pack the slip in. I don't think you can really see it, but we're trying to pack the slip in to form like a little wedge to give it some extra support. Don't be shy about sticking more slip in. There we go. Now, as you can see, there's still that remaining telltale crack. We're just going to take slip, not magic wax, it's so far dried. I'm just going to kind of rub it into the crack. It very likely will crack again, just because the crack is there and it is so deep. But it won't be as deep, and it may just take another clean to get it out. Okay. I'm going to recarve the wing hole. Okay, we're going to see how that holds up. It's hard to tell it was ever broken. Okay. So there we go. If it cracks again, just do the same thing. It'll be a lot closer. And other than that, he just needs a week to dry, and we can put him in for firing and for glazing. Dum, 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 dum.